Welcome to Popcorn Unscripted, the podcast where we dive into movies and TV shows with no scripts, no filters, just real talk and plenty of popcorn. From timeless classics to the newest releases, it's all about real opinions and unfiltered conversation. I'm your host, Bailey, and let's grab some popcorn, sit back, and let the show begin. If you die in the game, you die in real life. Welcome to episode 52 and yet another episode of Fright Corn Fest. It's coming to the end of October and I can't believe that it's already almost over. I just feel like this month has just kind of flown by to a certain degree, but then again, I've been having a lot going on this month to make it go by really quickly, but I digress. So, the movie we are talking about today is a movie that came out in 2006. It's a mystery thriller. I say it's a horror movie because it is horrifying, but the genres that they list it's not a part of the horror genre, even though I definitely think it should be. This movie is called Stay Alive. So basically, it's early 2000s horror meets haunted gaming. So basically, what this means, what this is. So basically, there is a video game in the movie called Stay Alive, and essentially, it is it's a horror video game shooter thing. I don't really know, but essentially, what happens is that if you play this game and you die in the game, you die the same way that you died in the game, but in real life. And that's what's very, I guess that's what's really horrifying about it, is the way some of these people die in this movie. Like, one person died by, hanging, and then the entity that's a part of the video game ends up killing this girl and draining her of her blood, and there's blood all over the room, and then one guy gets killed by a horse-drawn carriage, and one dies by shears. It's absolutely insane. One gets stabbed by shears. But this movie in total, let's see, 1, 2, 3, and then 4, then 5. 5 kills in total in this movie, and it's very, very interesting. But I think it's just a miss movie. You can't find this movie anywhere on any streaming platforms. You have to buy it or rent it off of Amazon or YouTube or some way, because it's not a very well-known movie, but it's so good. Even though, now that I'm kind of looking it up, it is a almost exact 5 out of 10 on IMDb and a 12% on Rotten Tomatoes. But this movie is good. I think it's good. It also has Frankie Muniz in it, which is probably the biggest name out of all of the actors, as well as Jimmy Simpson. But I know him because of Herbie Fully Loaded. Fully Loaded? Yeah. Because of Herbie Fully Loaded, the Lindsay Lohan one. That's the only other movie I know him from. And then, of course, Frankie Muniz is known for Malcolm in the Middle. But, this movie, it's not that long either. It's at least, it says the running time here is an hour and 40 minutes, but I think I watched, the movie I had bought it off of Amazon. It's $5 to buy it digitally on Amazon, by the way. But yeah, it's an hour 30-ish minutes. So it's not a long movie, and I think it's well paced to a certain degree. But it's a very, very good movie. It still scares me. Not gonna lie. I rewatched this movie yesterday, and I was still horrified to even look at it and watch it, because this stuff in this movie is rated PG-13, by the way. This is a PG-13 movie. The way some of this is just horrifying, and I can't believe it. But you can't find this movie anywhere. You can't even really find it on DVD anywhere. You can't find it. Like, this is like a hidden gem. That's what I was looking for. This movie is such a hidden gem, and I absolutely recommend it because it's super interesting. Also, watch the trailer if you've never heard or seen this movie, but it's incredible. It's incredible. So let's go for a plot setup here. So, a group of friends plays a mysterious video game called Stay Alive. So, how it actually begins is this friend of the group, that eventually plays it, was basically beta testing this game, right? For it to come out mainstream. And so, what happens is that he plays this game, and I guess this guy kind of gets pretty freaked out. And so he ends up calling his friend, being like, hey, you want to come over, play this game, trying to kind of talk himself out of it, because he was pretty creeped out. And to be fair, I would be too. If I played this game, I'd be very, very creeped out. But I digress. But this guy ends up dying from the entity. We're not really sure what the entity is until later in the movie, of course. But essentially what the video game does that we learn throughout the movie is that it's a seance video game, and you pretty much summon this entity into your home as you're playing the video game. And you have to, it's literally video game come to life. To a certain extent. Like, you still have to play the game in order to not die in real life, but it's so, it's horrifying to me. It's horrifying. And then when one of them dies the same way their in-game character did, they realize something deadly is at play. So it wasn't until, the boss man of the group, that the character named Hutch works for, it was their boss man, and then I actually have the characters' names right here. So you have Swink, who's Frankie Muniz's character, and then you have Hutch, October, Abigail, and then Phineas or Finn. So it's those four. Well, it's those five, and then one other character, Miller. That's the boss man. So six people end up playing this game all together. It's an online game. And so they play this game, and Miller ends up dying in the game. And one thing that I noticed when watching through this movie, the entity starts to come for you when you start hearing a buzzing sound. And the buzzing sound, if you've ever heard, a controller, if you have a controller, laid down in front of you and it buzzes and it rattles the table, that's the buzz that you hear before the entity kills you. Which I think is actually pretty cool. That's how you know something's gonna happen, or you know something is about to happen, is when you hear that buzzing sound, which is the buzzing of a controller. Which I think is actually pretty cool. But I digress. So Miller ends up dying the same exact way that he did in the video game. Which, of course, Hutch doesn't realize that happened until the next morning when he goes into work and finds his friend stabbed to death. With shears. Or really just stabbed to death. Not necessarily with shears, but he was unfortunately stabbed like he was in the game. And that's when he starts to wake up and realize, wait a minute, my friend died playing this game. Then my friend played this the night he died. Or both friends did. The night they died. And then Miller played it the night that he died. And so it's like he started connecting the dots and things of that nature as well. And then enters the curse of Countess Elizabeth Bathory and the blend of ghost story plus gaming horror. So essentially how the game works. So at the beginning you have to say this prayer before the game can even continue on its own. You can't skip it or anything. You have to say this prayer before you can even start customizing your character and playing the game. And the game even warns you as you get into the character customization, like, you will die. You are going to die. Like this big, like, burly man voice, like, tries to tell you this, but of course, these people aren't really paying attention. They just want to play the game. So that's what ultimately ends up happening, is that these people just end up playing the game. And it's, I wouldn't say it's brutal, but the way some of these people die are brutal. And it's honestly quite crazy. It's honestly, like, crazy in and of itself. Yeah, like, I don't really know how else more to tell you about the game other than that it can be brutal. So, ultimately, the goal of the game is to get to the tower that's in the graveyard and pretty much put 3 nails into her and then light her body on fire. Is essentially how it's supposed to work. So essentially what that's supposed to do, according to what October finds out in the movie, is that when you put the 3 nails in and you burn the blood, it brings the human spirit back to the body, and then the body dies. And so that you would think, oh, that would mean that just kills it. Well, to a certain extent. Because of the way this movie goes, essentially the game becomes real life. And so essentially you become the embodiment of your video game character. And so when you see at the end of the movie, let's see. So at the end of the movie, the game actually ends up becoming mainstream and ends up coming out on the PlayStation 2. Because 2006, PlayStation 2, that's kind of when that big boom was kind of happening in the gaming world at the time. And so, and I guess that's kind of one of the messages of this movie, is that be careful what you play, because, like, anyway. But, where was I even going? I'm trying to forgot. So October ends up finding out about this story. And the game is based off of this woman's life. So essentially what she would do is she would kill women in her, like, secret chamber or whatever it was. And she would pretty much drain them of blood. And so that's how she finds out, hey, we need to bring this spirit back into her body and then we have to burn her blood. Essentially is what she said, but ultimately they ended up burning her body, but I digress. But yeah, so that's pretty much the whole plot, is this group of people trying to get through this game, and it comes to real life, and it ends up killing them, and it's a horror fest. quite literally a horror fest. So, we'll go through the full plot breakdown. So, you get the cold open death, which is Loomis and then his 2 roommates. All 3 of them end up dying, I believe. Even though we only see really how Loomis dies. We do see in the bedroom, because Loomis ends up, like, being a peeping Tom. Not really a peeping Tom, I guess. He kind of just opens the door and this couple's going at it, and, it's, yeah, so that couple ends up dying in that room, but we don't really see it a whole lot. Since it's a PG-13 movie, we can't really, I guess back then they weren't really allowed to show that type of stuff. So yeah, we only see that for, like, a brief moment, and then we watch as Loomis gets hanged, by a chain, like his character did in the video game. Because he got overwhelmed by things coming after him. And so it is really, that death is what kind of sets off the story. And then you get the group dynamics. You get Hutch, Abigail, Swink, Phineas, and October, along with Miller. But Miller only lasts for, like, the first bit of the movie, because he ends up dying, obviously. About like Loomis. I would say he about had the same amount of screen time as Loomis did. Because he was there at the beginning of the movie, and then later he ends up dying whenever they get the game set up and everything after Loomis's funeral. And that's where Hutch actually gets the game from. He gets the game from his sister, Loomis's sister. And so you get to see how all of these characters work. So they all get together and they play this game. And Swink was actually trying to tell them of this thing that he learned, how we can how you perceive video games in reality, something like that. I can't really remember off the top of my head, but it was actually really interesting if you really think about it. But they end up playing the game. Miller ends up dying, and then you have the discovery of the link between the game and the real life deaths, which of course Hutch is the one that ends up discovering this, and of course it makes him sound like he's crazy, which since we the audience know, like, hey, this isn't crazy, but of course the people in the movie don't know that. Then you have like the rules of the game. It would just basically just stay alive. That's really the main rule of the game. So basically the main rule is if your character dies in the video game, you die in real life in the same manner. Other rules involve starting the game by reciting the Prayer of Elizabeth. That's another rule, which is basically starting the seance of the video game. The whole video game is a seance, which is very, very scary. And understanding that some elements like wild roses can provide protection or hinder the game's antagonist, the Blood Countess, which is who Elizabeth is. And then the game also continues to play and cause harm even when nobody is actively playing it. So once you start the game, you are in it. Like, no matter if you are playing the game or not, you are in the game. Regardless, like, you are in the game. And that's one of the things that's very, very scary about the game, is that even though you're not playing, the game is still active. No matter if you even shut down the computer or what, like, the game will always be active, because you basically put yourself into the game. Whenever you create your avatar and things like that. So it basically the avatar basically represents you in real life, and then you have to go through this not only in game, but you go through it in real life. Which is why it says the normal rule: if your character dies in the video game, you die in real life in the same manner. And then you have the research montage, and then you learning about Elizabeth, who she was, what she did. How she did things, basically her whole story. Because in the game, you end up finding her diary, and if I remember correctly, she ended up killing 8 girls and draining them of blood in her, torture chamber. They end up finding her torture chamber, and it's nuts, dude. It's nuts. And even one of the characters almost end up dying in that manner, actually. So that whole research montage is actually pretty cool because of the way the story goes. I really enjoy the story that they brought to Elizabeth and how these people discover that, because October, when they were first playing the game at the beginning of the movie, October was like, hey, I think I remember this story, because our grandma had told us the story, because she's related to Phineas. And so it's her, remembering this. She had heard the story before, but, of course, obviously, she still played it, and stuff like that. So, yeah. No, it is 6. It is 6 deaths, because October ends up dying, too. It's Swink that I'm not sure of, because it's I don't remember how he lives, because even in the movie, well, not the movie, I've lost my train of thought, but, in the movie, you watch Swink's video game character die, but later on, you see Swink still alive, so it's how did Swink live? I guess I'll ask Google. Hold on. because he did fall into a bush of roses, but in the game, he still died. So it's kind of weird. So Swink survives the events and stays alive because when the Countess tries to kill him in the real world, he falls into a bush of roses, and this prevents his death. The Countess was trying to cheat and kill him after his character in the game died. When Hutch and Abigail return to the van, Swink's character is shown as dead on a laptop, but in reality, he was saved by the rosebush. So the Countess was trying to cheat. Like, the entity itself was trying to cheat the game just to kill him off. Because she knew what their plan was. And so, yeah, okay, that's what I thought had happened, because I was kind of confused on that part, because I was like, he landed in the rose bushes, like, why is he dead? But in real life, she couldn't kill him because he landed in the rose bushes, and roses meant protection. So he ended up killing him in the game anyway, but he stayed alive in real life. Which is actually a really cool detail once you think about it. That's actually a really cool detail. Then you have the finale. Game logic makes gothic horror in the real world, because you end up... So Hutch ends up driving 3 nails into her, and then, of course, she stands up, the 3 nails fall out, and he uses his laptop as a mirror, because in this game, she doesn't like to look at herself because of how old she's getting. And so he holds up his computer and she can see her reflection, which sets her into like a rage, I guess, or she gets horrified of her face or something like that. And so Hutch then takes the opportunity to then set her on fire. And that's one backstory thing about Hutch that we end up learning when he goes to search Loomis's house after he died, and they were trying to do the whole research stuff, trying to figure out like how this whole thing got started. They found like the developers and things like that. But he goes and searches Loomis's house, and he ends up telling Abigail, like, he had this whole thing with fire because his mother ended up I think his dad ended up setting the house on fire, and she was still asleep in the bed, but he couldn't get out. And so he ended up with this, like, huge burn on his right shoulder, and stuff. So fire was kind of like a big, like, scary thing for him, which is true. And we do see flashbacks of that, in the finale here, too, and things like that. So, I think it was a fairly satisfying ending. But, after we watched those characters walk out of there, we then have the final boss energy, how the Countess is defeated, or is she defeated? We end up seeing at the end of the movie, as I had mentioned earlier, we see this guy from the video game store. He gets a box of video games to put out on the shelves, and that game just so happens to be Stay Alive. And at the end of this movie, we hear people reciting the prayer, and so that makes me think, okay, so she's not truly defeated because she is within the game. So, essentially, what happened is these guys, yes, they were playing the video game, but it also came back to them in real life. So, they defeated the game in real life and not the actual game itself. So, it's kind of, I feel like that's kind of a bit convoluted if you really try to think about it. It's kind of messed up, in a sense. So, but it's just, I don't really know. It's just so messed up the way everything is. It's just so messed up. But yeah, I don't think she's necessarily dead because you can't really kill an entity. Like you can't just do that. I mean, you can prevent it, but you can't kill an entity again if they're already dead. You know, that's one thing I was thinking about when watching this. I was just like, you can't really kill it because she's just gonna come back. And as we see at the end, is he puts this game on the TV and stuff, and you know she's clearly standing there, still alive. You know, like you can't kill an entity that's embedded itself into a video game, into a digital space. That's something you can't necessarily do because once it's out there, and you can't get rid of it, unless you get rid of it at its source, which is what they didn't do. They just fed into the game and they played the game. They didn't try to stop it at its source, which is what they thought they were doing, but they didn't do that. And so, yeah, that's, yeah. So we'll get into horror meets gaming. The idea of a haunted video game. Like, this was actually a very cool concept, I think. Because, like, you see, like, haunted dolls. You see haunted items all of the time. And, and it's funny, because we have never had a movie like this that tackled it to where it's a video game that's haunted and not some foreign object. Like, I think this is a really interesting type thing. I mean, you have Jumanji, yeah, but Jumanji didn't really do it the way this game did it, and it's really, really, really cool. In my opinion, I think that's what makes this movie such a classic to me, because it's a concept that has never been done over again. That makes me wonder if they could possibly make a sequel to this movie now. Now that Staying Alive would now be almost 20 years old. It would be 20 years old next year if this movie took place in 2006. Or really 2005. Since this movie was filmed in 2005, it would have been 2005. So the game would have been 20 years old by this time if they were to make a sequel. A sequel movie to this. And so, yeah, I think a sequel would actually be pretty cool. But the idea of a haunted video game is very, very cool to me. It's a very, very neat concept. Yeah, I like the idea a lot. I think that's why I enjoy this movie a lot, because it hit close home to me, because I am a big video gamer. And so it's really cool to me. And it really did tap into the early gamer culture, because of course this was during the age where the PS2 and the Nintendo stuff was all coming out, and it was like a really big boom. You had the first Xbox and stuff coming out, and you had the LAN parties, the Red Bull, the awkward flirting. There's a good bit of it in all of this, and that's why all of them had to be in the same place in order to play this game. Like, they were all in this one place, and they had to run it off of a LAN system in order to even play it multiplayer, which is really, really cool. But how Miller played is a different story. He had to play online somehow, and so it's very, very cool. And also, the visual style of the game is very creepy. It's very, very creepy. Especially, I noticed, whenever it was in real life, it was, bright and sunny. You had bright colors. But when you were transferring to the game, it would kind of dull down to, Twilight. That's what I would think of when I watched it. I was like, those are Twilight colors. Don't do that. But those moments were really, really, really cool. Especially with the way they used lighting and stuff to tell whether they were in the game or whether they weren't in the game, or whether something was going to happen or not going to happen. The way they used sounds and light was really cool in this movie, and I think people don't give it as much of a chance as I think it does, because of course the Rotten Tomatoes score was 12%, if I remember correctly, but I'm not sure if it was critic score or audience score, but I'm going back to look at it just a second. Yeah, it was critic score was 12%, and it's 56% on the popcorn meter. It's not, it's not the best horror mystery thriller movie, but I still think it's a cool concept by far. Very, very cool concept. And I don't think there's been a movie quite like this one since this movie. So, I digress. Would this work as a real horror game today? I genuinely think it could, because if you watch the video game, it really gives you Resident Evil vibes, which may be what they were going for, because I'm not really sure when Resident Evil came out, the very first one. Let's see. Resident Evil game series. Because 4 came out when the PS3 was coming out. Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 1 came out when? Yeah, Resident Evil 1 came out in 1996. It was published by Capcom for PlayStation. So So if you think about like the Resident Evil series, that's what this Stay Alive game reminded me of heavily, especially if you were going at the very beginning of the movie when you watched Loomis play, he was going through the house. It gave me Resident Evil 8 vibes before Resident Evil 8 became a thing, because he was playing it in first person, which was interesting because later on in the movie you see people playing it in third person, which I guess that might be a continuity error. I'm not exactly sure. But Resident Evil 2 was another big one as well. The original Resident Evil 2 came out in 98. Let's see, Resident Evil 3 was remade in 2020, obviously. The Resident Evil 3, it was called Resident Evil 3 Nemesis back then, but it came out in 99, and then Resident Evil 4, the original Resident Evil 4 came out in 2005. Yeah. So, yeah. This movie gives me complete Resident Evil vibes when you play it. Yeah. I don't know how I got on that rabbit hole, but this wouldn't be Popcorn Unscripted if it didn't have any of that in it. But yeah, I genuinely think it would work today as a horror game. Maybe leave the haunted bit out, but I think it would be an interesting concept where you have to go and fight, where you're trying to dodge this entity and its goons, and you end up trying to I would put it in an actual horror game concept. So what would happen is you would start off at, you would choose your character, obviously. You would have 6 character choices maybe. And you would go into this place with those 6 characters. Make it a choice-based game or something. Kind of like what is it called? Until Dawn, or what's the other one with the werewolves? Or it's not werewolves. Hold on. I'm trying to think, but I don't really know. But yeah, I would probably try to make it a choice-based game. You go into this house and you're trying to, maybe you're stranded and you're parked just outside the gate, but your van dies, so you couldn't bring it onto, the manor property. So you walk up to this manor and you try to stay into this house, but there's so much creepy stuff you don't know what to do. And then that's when the Countess's goons start to come out. Maybe somebody dies at the very beginning. But you're left with 2 characters. Your character that you picked, and then one other character that maybe you end up... you would try to save all 6 characters. Keep all 6 characters alive, but, I think that would be kind of difficult considering what this game is, but yeah, I think Stay Alive would be a very interesting horror game today if it's made, because it's very, very cool. So what works versus what falls flat? What works is the concept, the atmosphere, the Countess Bathory lore, all of that really works. And then of course Swink with the Mountain Dew and the laptop in the Rose Garden, yeah, is very iconic. So all of that really, really works. And what doesn't work is its PG-13 restrictions. If it wasn't PG-13, I feel like they could have done way more. They could have done way better, I think, if it wasn't PG-13, if it was rated R. But I don't think it would have done as well. Or maybe it would have done better if it was rated R. Lord knows. Which that was what people's complaints were about when Five Nights at Freddy's came out 2 years ago now. And so, is that it was rated PG-13, and they thought it really limited what they could do, because Friday Nights at Freddy's is such a horror game. And then, of course, you do have some flat dialogue or inconsistent type tone. And I don't think it's the actor's fault. It could be because of the people that wrote the script, but it could be a mix of both. To me, I didn't really notice anything flat, or anything like that, although I do think Hutch's performance was a little flat, maybe. But everybody else did an amazing job. I think this movie's pretty solid, for what it is, and I do think it still holds up today. I do think there were some missed opportunities with some jump scares and kills, maybe. I mean, to be fair, I think the jump scares were pretty much on par. But then again, I get scared easy, but I digress. But I do like how they used the background to their advantage, in this movie. Whether you noticed it or you didn't, is entirely up to you. But, yeah, I do think there were some jump scare misses. I don't know if there was, like, any kill misses or not, but I digress. So, I'll go ahead and get into my final thoughts and some questions for you guys as well. Does Stay Alive deserve more love? I absolutely 100% think it does deserve more love. I think there should be a sequel movie made to it, maybe. I think that would be really, really cool. Seeing, like, where the 3 characters that ended up staying alive are these days. Like, I think that would be really, really cool. To get Frankie Muniz back, get the guy that played Hutch back, and the girl that played Abigail. I think getting the 3 of them back would be pretty cool. Especially now they would probably have kids. Like, maybe Hutch ended up marrying Abigail or something. Maybe they ended up getting together, and then Swink was doing something. Maybe he became a game developer himself or something. I could see Swink doing that. I think that would be really, really cool, to see a sequel to this movie, because this is such a cool concept, and especially if they were to make the sequel rated R, I think that would be very, very cool. I think it would be interesting. How would you survive a haunted video game? I probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't survive, if I'm going to be completely honest, because I'd probably die, like, instantly. Especially if the game is like Stay Alive. Now, if it's just a haunted video game, I've played those, like, many times, so even though I did die I would die a lot. I die a lot, but it's fine. It'll be fine, it'll be alright. So, here are 3 questions for you guys in the audience. Did you see this one in theaters back in 2006? I was 6 years old, so obviously I didn't. Would you play a game like this if it existed? I know I would, as long as it's not haunted. And what's your favorite haunted tech horror movie? I have a feeling some of you would probably say Saw, because that's what comes to mind when I hear haunted tech horror. For some weird reason, I just go to Saw, but I digress. But yeah, we've got one more episode of Fright Corn Cess, which will come out on Halloween. It's going to be an interesting movie. I have never watched this movie that I will be recording for Friday. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. That's a wrap on today's episode of Popcorn Unscripted. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. New episodes drop every Monday and Friday, so be sure to tune in. Until next time, keep your popcorn close and your movie critiques closer. Thanks for listening to Popcorn Unscripted.